We're here with Leigh. How's it going, Leigh? Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
So, you want to tell us a little bit about what are you doing in the Franca's life, or how did you join this beautiful experience?
Yeah, well, I've grown up in Queensland, but for the last 30 years I've lived in the United States. So I keep a boat in the Yeppoon Marina, and I've owned this boat, the houseboat K2, for 20 years this year. And every year I come down and spend time on my boat, but most of my life is in, Denver, Colorado. The first I heard about Franca was on the news one night. She'd run aground at the mouth of Round Hill Creek, and I was thinking, some fucking idiot, and but on meeting, the family that lives on Franca, I learned the true story that he was relying on old information, and it's a shifting sandbar entrance there. It's a place I know very well because I used to have a shack in the bush down there with a group of friends, and when I was in my late teens, early 20s, used to go down there surfing every weekend. So there's always been a marine experience in my life. My family has many firsts in the boating world. One of the firsts is that my father built the world's first outboard powered catamaran.
Wow.
He sold it to a guy who later on became Shark Cat, Bruce Harris. And so all my life, my father, when he'd see a Shark Cat or other power catamarans, he would say, "Oh, I invented those." Another thing in the 1950s my father did was he owned the first fiberglass boat factory in Australia. Wow. So he used to manufacture up to 250 fiberglass dinghies per year. This is in the early 1950s, before resins were available here. So he used to import resins from the USA. Before my father got into the fiberglass boat things, the boat building, he had an extraordinary experience in that at the end of the Second World War, my father was in the army for the last year of the war, but never went overseas, never had the big adventure that some people were talking about. So my father bid on a Barrier Reef island at an auction. And so my father owned Orpheus Island from 1948 to 1951, and he lived on that island as a beachcomber, and built a stone shack on that island. Wow. And the ruins of that shack still exist in Pioneer Bay. So anybody in the marine world travelling up the coast, and you end up at Orpheus Island and you end up in Pioneer Bay, you follow the trail up just a little way and you'll see the ruins of the house that my father built in 1948.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I heard your famous in Manly in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah,
you want to tell us this story?
Yeah, so this is a story we were just talking about. I'm going to repeat it again. I'm 63 years old, and for at least 40 years, it might have been 45 or 50 years, I've been telling the story that I was the first baby born in the Manly Hospital in Sydney, on Sydney Harbour. Well, 2 years ago, I arrived from Colorado, visit my mum who's retired in Sydney, and I said, let's catch the ferry over to Manly. So in my excitement of first day back in Australia, as I'm getting the ticket from the ticket lady, I had 2 tickets on the Manly ferry, I said, oh, by the way, I was the first baby born in the Manly Hospital. And my mother jumped in and said, no, you weren't. That was your cousin Leanne. So I've been telling my cousin Leanne's story all my life. So that was sort of humbling, And so be careful with what you think's the truth,
You created it yourself. Your mind, your child mind created that truth.
That's right. That was my truth, and it worked good for me for 45 years.
Yeah, so be careful with what people tell you, or what society tells you, what the priest tells you when you're young. You might trust, you might believe it, it might be totally wrong.
Absolutely. So in 1959, my family left Sydney and we moved up to the Gold Coast, and we lived on Currumbin Creek, and we lived there for 5 years, and that's where my dad built the first outboard powered catamaran, and he used to fish the local reefs there when there was surf on the river entrances and no one else could get out. So my dad was always a very good fisherman. So then we moved up to Hervey Bay after 5 years on the Gold Coast, and my father decided to build a trimaran, but instead of plywood, that there was a lot of those around, fiberglass, he built a trimaran out of steel, and it was a heavy boat. The boat was 40 foot long, 20 feet wide, and we used to take tourists over to Fraser Island, and that was in the around about 1965, around about that time, I believe. And so we operated this tourist boat for a number of years, and being a steel boat, before 2-pack paints and all that sort of stuff, the boat got really rusty, really ugly very quickly. And so what we turned the boat into then was a commercial fishing boat. So my father built a large ice box, and we used to go out to Lady Musgrave and go out to the 60 fathom line and fish for snapper and other bottom fish out there.
Wow.
He would come in with 1.5 ton of fish, for a 1 week trip.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, just the
I didn't catch anything when I was there.
Yeah,
I'm not a good fisherman.
yeah, and so then fortunes in the family weren't, from my father being a very successful businessman in the 1950s. By the time we left Hervey Bay, we were down to owning a boat, and we didn't own a house then. So the family, we moved aboard the trimaran, and we travelled up to Gladstone, and we were fishing out at Musgrave from Gladstone for a while, and then during the summer season we used to go commercial crabbing up the Narrows, between Curtis Island and the mainland. But my parents saw a chance for me to be successful at school, and we were, my brother, sister and I all living aboard the working fishing boat. There was little chance to go to school, and I was old enough to be going, the middle years of high school. So my father took a job in Gladstone, and this very, very adventurous man, and this quite an innovator. It was quite humbling for him to get a regular job, and he was working on the construction of the alumina plant in Gladstone, and I finished Gladstone High School. Yeah. Nice.
So you've been on Franca already, on the boat?
Yeah, and so Franca is a very strongly built boat. It's obviously has a history. It's as soon as you step aboard Franca, the previous owner, unfortunately he's passed away now, I believe, his story is still there. You can feel him and you can almost smell him in there, and all the little knife cuts on the woodwork, or where he used to keep his pots and pans, you really feel him there. And unfortunately Franca has a bit of a engine problem with its diesel engine. It has a 3-cylinder Volvo Penta, and the one place you don't want to see water coming out of a diesel engine is out of the air intake. So we've pulled the air intake manifold off today, and we're doing a bit of diagnostic surgery. This is a fatal condition for a diesel engine if water's getting into the valves and the tops of the cylinders. So we're hoping Franca proves to be easy to repair, and cheap is always good. And so tomorrow we'll probably learn more about that. Franca just happens to be my next door neighbour in the marina, and that's how I came to know Franca and Sharky. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Great time with you. Hey, Leigh. See you soon. Speak soon. Ciao.
Ciao.